a few people going like, oh, it's very late. I think we'll give it a go. We have 13 attendees, and it might still grow as we go. It's not unusual. Um, but I just want to welcome you, and not just the panelists from all around the world, but I guess a lot of the attendees will be coming from different parts of the world as well. So, very much welcome. My name is Lex Verweij. I will be your moderator for tonight. I am closely aligned with Hacking HR. I've been so for a couple of years. Was one of the co-founders of the London chapter, and I've worked with Enrique in different capacities. Even as Enrique advised my company on the future of HR at some point in the recent past. And we have a wonderful topic to discuss, HR trailblazing the path to the future. Um, Particularly interesting to me. I'm fascinated by the topic because HR and future doesn't always go together naturally. It feels kind of like HR has this image of being a little bit conservative, a bit traditional, a bit old-fashioned. But we know, as practitioners around the world, working with Hacking HR and other organizations, we can be trailblazing. And we're going to talk to you about that today. And I've got a wonderful panel. Let's go as much as I can alphabetically. Until I get it wrong, but alphabetically, I would like to start with introducing Anoop. And I'll kick off with what your current position is, but please do add some of your bio interesting facts around as well. But you're currently a global HR leader, and you're a work tech startup founder. You're involved in many different things. You're very interested in coaching leadership and developing leadership, and you're currently a VP of HR at Ford Australia and New Zealand, explaining why you're used to getting up that early in the morning with your boss back in the US. You have worked with so many people over the years, and you really feel you're really getting excited around the complexity of technology and the opportunities it gives to the organizations. And just maybe add one or two of your kind of key statements to that bio of the things that really excite you.
Thank you, Lex, and thank you very much to all the panelists and the participants. Really great to be here. Look, you've covered it really well. And one thing, if I can add, is I really believe in the unlimited human potential in all of us. And one thing that stands out in the way I work and where I connect with people in organizations is really bringing out our inner hero. We all love, coming to work. And how do we really make sure that people thrive at work? Thank you.
Welcome. Good to have you here. And next, then alphabetically, I'm still doing this correct alphabetically. I will go to Aysha. Aysha, you're currently the VP of Engagement, Diversity, and Inclusion at Emirates NBD, but your entire career has been around building capability, building transformation, creating transformation. And on the back of your masters in HR from NYU and your coaching certifications in different parts of the world, because I do realize they're very different in their approaches. That what excites you about kind of like the world of HR and the future of HR at the moment?
What really excites me is the people aspect, right? And we see that in everything that we do, especially in the area that I'm in, which is culture, diversity, coaching, and things like this. You are able to really see the impact you make in terms of changing people's behaviors and really unlocking in them what they have to bring to the table. So once you're able to create a environment in which you bring out the best energy in people, their performance starts to increase, their mood starts to increase, and you all of a sudden your company's performance is through the roof. So it's a really great thing to see.
Excellent. Thank you for being here. And now it's getting tricky. What is first? I think K comes first. Kirstin, thank you for being here. We're almost in the same time zone. We're only an hour apart compared to some of the others who are much further apart. And you're currently the people director of Channel 4. I love Channel 4. I've lived in London for about 15 years, and it was the go-to channel. And but you have a long-standing career, I think, in media and communication. Also, the 20th Century Fox, Discovery, BBC Worldwide, but also Qatar. And you're currently also non-executive for the British Wheelchair Basketball Association. That is so cool. All of the amazing things you've done, that's the one I actually think is the coolest, and I think a lot of people would agree with me.
Can you see athletes who do it?
Well, yeah, and I mean, exactly. It's impressive to see that the Paralympics are always my favorite, actually, over the normal Olympics when I think about it. But what is sort of driving you in HR? What are the things that fascinate and engage and inspire you in HR?
Well, I'm going to repeat a little bit about what Anoop and Aysha has said as well. I think we all share, and Lisa will, I'm ready to hear what you're going to say in terms of creating that right environment so that people can thrive. I think what's so fascinating and such an opportunity for us as a profession is the world is completely changing and the world of work is completely changing. So bringing those two things together, along with our people expertise, is providing us a real opportunity to be creative, to trailblaze, if I say that word, and to do something really different and exciting. So that's what's keeping me up at night, in a positive way.
Very good. Yes. Well, thank you for being here. And then, last but not least, Lisa, you've actually just had one of the most amazing busy periods of your life, I must imagine, preparing for an IPO. So thank you for making it. I mean, amongst all of those busy hours and hopefully also some festivities to round that off. And you are the Chief People and Culture Officer at if I'm saying this correctly, EverCommerce.
Yes.
Ah, very good. Lucky guess. And what is sort of some of the things that fascinate and engage you in HR at this point?
Yeah, obviously, I echo what Kirstin said. You know, the people aspect of this is the whole reason why we do this, right? That said, what I am so incredibly energized and excited about is how critical the people, culture, HR function is becoming to business success. Like, it's great that we do all of these things to make these incredible environments for people to thrive in and work in. But it's absolutely critical that what we're doing is creating value for the organization. And having been gone through now my second IPO, I see the impacts of getting the people and culture right on the success of the business. And so I think for me, that's what really excites me. It's great to do all these wonderful things, but to see how they have impacts both on the business and the people themselves is really where there's tremendous opportunity in the future ahead.
Well, thank you. And thank you for being here tonight or today or this morning or this afternoon.
I'm in
Early in
Colorado,
the morning.
so it's afternoon. I've got the easiest schedule right now.
Well, you get the afternoon nap. You have to try and avoid what we do this. So great to have you all here. And as I said, I was fascinated by the topic, trailblazing the path to the future. It's the future HR trail, but also the word trailblazing. It's not a word you would normally expect in the HR environment or in Europe, for that matter. It's probably a little bit more of an American term. But in trying to kind of like figure out what that means and what we can do with that and how we think HR can affect the future in a positive way, there's probably a few questions that we can go through. So as a setup for the panel, what we decided to do is I'll pose a question and just go around the room, virtual room, and then change the order for the second question as I go around the room and kind of like mix it up that way. But to pose a few questions and then go through those in that order for about, let's say, 30 minutes, and then open up the floor for Q&A for those people who are still with us at the end of the panel. So hang tight. You're going to have to ask a question at the end. So that's the first question. Just one of the things that I've been thinking about that we should have an opinion on and see what we can do with that is. So what are the kind of trends do we see in the future of HR, and what does that mean for the focus that HR should have relative to the future? If I can start with you, Anoop.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Lex. Look, I see three trends coming up in my mind and with experience with Ford at least. And this is on the back of not just the global pandemic that we've just seen and continues to happen, but also the transition and the transformation that's been happening over the last 5 to 10 years. So the three things that stand out for me, the first one is really co-creating what I would call the future of work or the evolution of work. And I'm saying that, and I'm using the word co-creating very purposefully because, tying up to the introduction you made about trailblazing, and HR being the leader. I think HR has been in the limelight for the last 1.5 to 2 years, particularly with the pandemic. And it's so critical for us to really partner with the business leaders, with their employees, with the people leaders, the teams and the organizations to really define what does the future look like, because it's here right now. The second thing I would say is we know more and more that, and the panelists talked about this, that people are really looking for purpose-driven work. And how might we create the environment for people to really bring that mindset and thrive at the workplace? And the third thing is, and this is really front and center, I think everywhere in the world, not just here in Australia and New Zealand, is this theme about caring for each other. Ford has been really, I think, a trailblazer, if you will, in recognizing and realizing that, you know, we really need to create a healthy workplace, and particularly mental health and well-being is so topical. And how do we and how might we bring that as a red thread into everything we do? You're on mute, Lex.
Oh, the classic mistake. Thank you. All right, I did that. Nobody else has to do it anymore. Aysha, how would you expand on that? Not
Well,
the
I think
muting, but
he just
Anoop.
stole all the words out of my mouth, so I don't know what to say. But no, I'm just going to touch on the last thing he said, because it's so important to me. And I'm so happy to see that we are really looking as organizations at our people as a whole person, and not just as an employee ID that can bring, you know, the numbers or create the products or services that we're offering. So when we talk about this focus on mental health, I really appreciate that these are not just conversations that are happening anymore. They're not just nice to haves. They're looked at as core needs of the business. And I think what's important here is that we as HR take on the responsibility to have these conversations become more normal, because I think there is the stigma attached, depending, you know, the level of the stigma and how strong it is also depends on where you are in the world, and what kind of level of education do you have around that. And I think it's important to understand that when we talk about mental health and our focus on it, we're not just talking about negative things. So, you know, when I bring this up, a lot of people say, well, how do we know if people have problems? I'm like, well, maybe they don't. Maybe there's, you know, a lot of great things that they bring outside of their skills and abilities that are technical. They have moods and they have energy and they have all of these great things that they bring to the table. How do we recognize these things? How do we learn how to speak about them? And how do we learn how to tap into them to get better performance and get a happier organization where people are willing to give us that extra step?
It's very nice. I'm starting to see a trend here. You know, the human interaction and the whole person and the mental health and the caring. There might also be a bridge to, as you know, that CEOs have been coming together in the US talking about, let's move from shareholder value creation to stakeholder value creation. A couple of CEOs have tried. I think somebody at Danone tried and then got fired. It's kind of still very scary. Is there something around that in HR that we can? I don't, you know, in terms of continuing the question of the trends, is that a trend that we should do something with? Kirstin or Lisa, if you want to pitch in on that one.
I'm happy to jump in. I'm not convinced that changing the vernacular of how we speak to that is going to dynamically and radically change the way we approach this. I do think it's important to look at people as actual stakeholders in the business at every level. I mean, organizations a lot of times look at their stakeholders in their company as being those in senior leadership, right? And the theme that I'm hearing today, very similar to my philosophy, is like, you got to go to where the action is, right? In order to drive fundamental change, you got to go to the lowest paid employees, the people who are closest to the action, who know what needs to be done to change the business, but many times don't have the podium or the voice or opportunity to speak about it. And I think to get to that place, there's a lot of things that we're going to have to do and take a dynamic approach to how we're thinking about reskilling and helping people build the appropriate networks to build the skills that they need and to accelerate the types of growth and development they need to really become that best version of themselves at work, right? Like, a part of being the whole person at work is being in a role where you are thriving and you are doing the things that, you know, you're really good at and enjoy doing and delivering value to the organization, that's radically changed over the last 12 to 14 months. Our workforce has become borderless. We have to take a more dynamic approach to how we think about people's characteristics, their skills, their competencies, their behaviors, their traits, and how we build that out to allow those people to truly be those stakeholders that we want in our organization. Again, I'm not sure the term, I don't see the term being very relevant right now in the US. I'm not seeing lots of people going out and changing it. They're just, it hasn't stuck yet. Maybe we will in 12 to 18 months. But again, I guess my question back to that would be, what's different? If I simply change going from shareholder to stakeholder, what has that really changed in terms of behaviors, outcomes, how people feel about work? I don't know that there's going to be a radical change there.
And I
That's
wonder,
a very
Lisa,
good point.
sorry, I'm already interrupting, aren't I? And I am off mute, so I'm sure there'll be someone else that does that. But I think, you know, one of the things that I see as a trend moving forward is how we know purpose is really important. We know personalization and understanding our employees is really important. So for us as people experts, it's really about providing what are those guardrails and frameworks that support the strategy of where you need to go, but provide whatever, I think, Lisa, whatever you say, if it's stakeholders, whatever that definition is, but everyone's moving in the same direction, and there is that flexibility piece. And I think that's certainly what we're really seeing now, aren't we, given the last 18 months, and Anoop, as you said, given trends are moving in that flexibility already of, I want to work in a different way, I want to work from a different country, I want to have different skills, I want to learn and develop. But for people professionals, we really need to provide, I believe, those guardrails so people can innovate, they can develop, they can create those ideas, but in service of the strategy of where the organization is going, so that, you know, we see the fruits of our experience and our ideas going to the next direction. So for me, that's where I feel is an important piece for trends of where we should be developing our skills to support the organization moving in that direction.
Very good. There's there's a lot to pick up on from that first question alone. But the other thing around it, obviously, is so these are the trends, and this is what we need to focus on. What does HR need to change to be able to do that? And if I can start with Aysha in that first question.
You're always picking on me. What's going on? Look, I think one of the things that needs to happen, and we as HR professionals talk about this a lot, we need to start learning how to play with other people in the sandbox. And oftentimes what I've seen over the years is HR will create solutions that are created by HR for HR, and they are looked at in the organization as an HR thing. So when we talk about culture, when we talk about all of these things, we want to create them with our stakeholders within the organization. They have to make sense to our strategy. If they are not pushing us towards our business goals, then they're nice to haves and they're not necessary. So we need to become better at learning how to, first of all, identify who we need in the room. Stop making decisions on our own, speak the language of our business, and then be okay to pivot, because we might try something that we all agree is the right thing to do. We need to be measuring whether that's working. And if it's not, we need to drop it like a bad habit and we need to turn the other way. And the only way to do this is to be doing everything at the same time. You need to be creating these ideas. You need to be talking to your stakeholders. You need to be measuring the things that you're putting forward. If you're so focused on creating this project that becomes your baby and you want to perfect it and make it wonderful and you never want to hear anything bad about it, you're going to have a problem. So you need to become a partner to the business, right? We have HR business partners, but it's a fundamental mind shift that we need to come at, together, and stop playing this is mine, don't touch it, I know better because I got a degree from wherever. That's just ridiculous.
This theme of co-creation, I think, is a very strong one, and we're also seeing the emergence of agile HR rather than HR for agile. We've had HR for agile when your teams are agile. How should your HR systems and cycles and approaches change? But really, truly agile HR Does anyone have an idea of how to be more agile in HR? What is it you need to do differently, and how do you work together in HR to be more agile like that and co-create with your people? Kirstin.
Well, I'll jump in, Aysha, because you did such a great introduction on this whole subject. So for me, it's about the 80-20 rule. And I really agree, Aysha, what you've said is, I think maybe as a profession, we've wanted to make everything absolutely perfect so that we get the big sort of like launch. Now, in the world that is changing so quickly, with data that's coming in every day, and us as people professionals really need to understand that data and understand the insights and be able to, and I use the word actually pivot in terms of what we're delivering. So never get it perfect. Do 80-20 because you're constantly improving and shifting as the world is shifting, as your business is shifting. And I think if you've got that 80-20 confidence, and to your point, you're listening with your stakeholders internally and externally, then you can be successful, because that goes back to that co-creation.
That's a very good point. Anoop and Lisa, anything to add?
I would just say what Aysha and Kirstin just said, like, as HR leaders, I truly believe one of our imperatives as an organization is really to think through, how do you redesign work to enable our employees to be more responsive, whether that's responsive to a global pandemic, responsive to work becoming borderless, what have you. And I think right now, organizations are not really positioned to be able to respond as quickly as they need to things that happen, right? And I think from us as HR leaders, it's up to us to continuously think through how to adapt the overall design of work, and what those strategies are within organizations. Because when we do that, right, it unlocks the ability for responsiveness in the organization. It helps us think about how to build organizational resilience. And whether that's through programs, through systems, through technology, through people, it's a way of looking at this through a different lens, right? Like here at EverCommerce, I actually have my entire leadership team together today working through how we are going to fundamentally redesign work in our organization to unlock organizational capacity. Like that's our job, right, as HR leaders, is to unlock organizational capacity, because that unlocks the capacity of our people. And so it's looking at work and the things that we do, again, whether they're people, systems, programs, et cetera, in a different light to create frictionless work environments where people can be responsive. And I think that is definitely a trend that I'm seeing here in the US, as organizations are looking to their most senior HR leaders to figure out how to unlock that capacity of the entire organization through their people, through their programs, through their technology, and being able to be as responsive as possible, regardless of what you're being hit with.
How do you do that? How do you stay abreast of change and deal with that from HR? What are some of the tricks that you've seen there?
Well, I think some of it is looking at alignment, right? Like we have so many places, even in our own organization, where we have misaligned work, right? Like we are trying to design a new way to go to market with a product, but the way that the team is aligned isn't actually allowing for the level of innovation and creativity that is necessary. And again, this is an ongoing adjustment. It's not like there is a framework that is in place and this is how work is designed. This is an evolution that needs to be revisited on a quarterly basis, right? Like we revisit our people strategy as frequently as we revisit our business and financial strategy here at EverCommerce. And we did the same in my previous life. That's how successful companies look at the people strategy. It is fundamentally a core component of their overall business strategy. And so many companies look at it once or twice a year, and it's more of a budgetary exercise than it is thinking about how do you redesign work? How do you get the decisions closer to the end user? How do you get rid of rigid process that really isn't necessary anymore in this flexible work environment? How do you make sure teams aren't overwhelmed? Those are the types of things that I think as leaders, we need to focus on to unlock that capacity of our people and our organization.
Okay. What are your thoughts, Anoop?
It's a fantastic question, and I'm really enjoying the dialogue and the discussion. Look, to answer that, I think three things stand out for me. One is in terms of, back to the question about how do we stay abreast of the change. We have to continue, if we aren't, we have to continue this whole path of learning. And I'm a big believer of learning for life. I think what we have seen in the last 18 months, and we will continue to see, is with this, I call it a huge black swan event, and there aren't many that we have. We have to really stay abreast of what's happening locally, regionally, and globally. And I think HR, being the role that we have, the custodians of culture, leading the organization, and all the points that the panelists mentioned, if we don't stay abreast of those changes, it becomes very difficult to form a point of view. Which brings me to the second point. There have been so many examples, not just at Ford, but I look at other global companies, the companies that we're talking about here today. We have to take a leadership role in leading with a strong point of view. Excuse me. And I say that because so many times that responsibility, that role rests on our shoulder, but we don't step up to it. Because if we don't do it, we're missing the really amazing opportunity and the silver linings, that these black swan events bring. And the last thing I would say is, not only leading with a strong point of view about whatever it is that we want to change, whether it's what does the future of work look like, what does HR technology look like, what does culture look like, and everything in between. But we have to start to learn to be comfortable with experimentation. And we have to learn to start experimenting with our own teams, with the business partners, with the business leaders, because to me, we are seeing an amazing life experiment that's happening right now. And there are no certain guarantees that this will be the end outcome. But bringing back to your point about agile HR, if we don't do that, I think we really stand short of shutting out the opportunities of change that we are seeing in front of us.
That's a good point. And I think it's one of the major challenges in HR, that the traditional approach to HR is very much structure and process. And so I was working on an agile HR project with a client the other day, and so the main question was about who does what locally and globally. Is it centralized? Is it decentralized? Is it global? Is it local? And like, look, it's a product owner with the personas and the teams making the decisions, and they come together, create use cases, a portfolio of projects, experiments, and then as a board, an HR board, you decide on where to allocate money for experiments. And if they're successful, you go back to the CEO and say, look, this is a very successful project and only $100,000. Now give me $1 million, I'll make it a global successful project. They couldn't get it. It took a long time to get to the point that they were moving away from, but who takes the decision again? It's you. It kept going like that. Really had to go through that. It was very painful. We actually had to bring in Enrique to talk about it.
That is very interesting, actually, if you don't mind me adding on to that, in terms of what should we be doing as a profession. Is I think there's something there, isn't there, about commerciality, in terms of really thinking about our business case of, right, what are we doing, back to the data, back to the business impact that we've all been talking about, aligned with the humanness is really critical. And I think something sometimes quite simple, and you're talking about, I love your lifelong learning. It's about being curious. And we are in the profession where we can go and talk to anyone in the organization. So let's go and partner with our marketing professionals, our tech experts, to really get and understand, because that will give us another perspective as well. And I think we just equip us with what we need to do to take us forward.
Yeah, and Aysha, with you in a financial services environment, you might appreciate the following statement and maybe respond to it. Like, I keep telling clients, that HR clients, you're running a venture capitalist. And it's a startup one. It's really the startup fund, because you're looking at a number of initiatives. The successful ones you build up and you put money in, and the less successful ones you kill quietly. They're gone. But you'll spend your money where you think there's going to be success, and overall you manage a success ratio, not a individual product success ratio, but an overall portfolio success ratio. What is your experience with kind of like creating that kind of like environment to work in?
Look, I think it has to come from leadership, right? HR is one of the businesses that I find quite funny sometimes, because nowhere else would it be acceptable to have, for example, a business strategy or policies around your business that were last updated in 1984. I have walked into client sites where I look at their HR policies and the last iteration was created literally in 2001 and nobody has relooked at this. And much to Lisa's point earlier, you should be looking at these things every quarter, much like you're looking at your income statements. And so I think the bar needs to be raised in terms of what we do as HR professionals, but also it needs to come from leadership, because I think that if you have a CEO or you know, an ex-com that is kind of like, well, whatever, it's just something we got to do. And then you have to add on to that an HR executive who is kind of comfortable just doing the things that we always do, you know, birthday cakes and balloons and all that ridiculous stuff. You set the precedent for this is what HR means in this organization. So it requires some bravery on our part to come in and say, let me show you the impact that I'm going to make for you. And instead of, you know, especially when you're going into a new organization and really introducing that, and that's something that, you know, we see a lot of in the Middle East, because the ideas and the philosophies around what HR should do is very new, and it's kind of almost like a baby. It's just growing up now. So we have to go in and we have to show proof of concept for things while also maintaining the old way of working, and really then using kind of like the proof is in the pudding to change the mindset, to say, actually, we should be in these board meetings because we're able to figure out whether your hiring strategies are going to be saving you money in the long run or going to be, you know, costing the organization the thing. And then like when there's downsizing. So I think the pandemic has been great. And I'm only speaking from my experience being in HR in the Middle East. It has been really great for us because we've been the people that everyone now turns to when you have to downsize, when you have to manage your organization with people stuck in various countries. What does this mean in terms of tax implications? What does this mean in terms of employee performance, et cetera, et cetera? How do we get IT on board? So all of a sudden now HR is forced to step up their game. So it's a two-pronged approach. One, we have to really bring our A game to the table and show how we are not a cost center. We are actually bringing business and making the organization more able to earn. And then the other is that leadership needs to have and hold us to high standards as well, and not just pat us on the head and say, thank you for the birthday cake last week.
It's a tough sell, right? Because our clients think that that's what we're supposed to be doing. I was much younger than I am today, and I was an HR advisor at a bank, and there was this letter that we had to send around performance to a wealth advisor. And the manager of the wealth advisor had very strong opinions about what should be in the letter, and I had very strong opposing opinions about what should be in the letter, because I didn't want to create a fight that we wouldn't be able to win, and that wouldn't have any positive conclusion that we could get to either leaving or upskilling or whatever. And then he said, no, I decide what you put in the letter. And I had to, and I was very young. I had to go to my boss, the global HR director, and get backing to go back to the manager and say, look, maybe, let's look at what the best way is to deal with this situation. So we have a hard sell internally, right? It's not easy. That business does look at us kind of like, you do what I tell you to do, and look after the cakes and the birthdays, and oh yeah, and then when people need to leave, can you do that for me? Because I hate doing that.
Yeah. Look, nobody gets cake more than me. So we do the cakes. We'll keep that. Nobody touched that. I like that. But I think, look, it's important. And again, speaking from my own experience in the world that I live in, where this is a new concept, we need to take the time to explain. Like, for example, in the instance you gave of this letter that you had to give to this person and the wording, we have to sit with the business, take the time to educate them as to why a certain approach would benefit them, right? The what's in it for me is very important. But if you as an HR professional don't understand why you are asking people to follow these policies or why you are asking people to perform in a certain way, you have no clout at all. And you are just making people feel like they have to tick boxes and it's not relevant. And you effectively are irrelevant as well. So you have to understand your business.
Lisa and Kirstin, with your operational HR roles in companies that have gone through changes and growth, what is your perspective on how you create that that position with the business?
I think it goes back to, this is a very simple thing, communication. And let's face it, that's quite difficult. because communication is on many different levels. So I think you have to look to communicate, going back to what Aysha was saying about the why, back to the purpose, like, you know, what's this in service of? And also, I think, you know, back to, I think we've all started off with, we're all different. We all take information in different ways. We all go to a meeting, we come out with a slightly different nuance of what we think it is. So let's make sure we build that into our communication of what we're doing. So I really think it's about communicating written, verbal, one-to-one, groups, and also in the dialogue as well, because this goes back to, this is a partnership model as where we're going. It's very, we've gone away from the, this is what you must do and you must work between these hours and complete it. We're now in an environment of, like, let's build trust, let's build excitement, let's build inspiration, and that needs to come from all angles, and that really comes from that communication perspective.
Good point. Lisa?
Yeah, I mean, what everybody has said, I definitely echo that. And I think, you know, what Aysha was saying around making sure that everybody's involved, right? Like I always go back to the common thing of, like, go to the people closest to the action, right? And make sure that they understand, as Kirstin just said, the why, but don't assume people understand things. Like, just going through an IPO, you know, there was an assumption, I think, made by a number of us that, hey, people understand what this means to our organization. It radically changes the way we behave. It radically changes the transparency of the communication of our organization, right? Because we used to be very open and made forward-looking statements about where we were projecting the business to go. Well, none of those things can happen anymore. Otherwise, we'll all be in orange jumpsuits because the SEC will find that unfavorable. And I look terrible in orange, for the record. But I think it's, you cannot overestimate the importance of, like, reiterating clarity, talking about clarity further, and making sure that it's everybody, right? Like, I always joke here at Ceridian, or at EverCommerce, and I said the same thing at Ceridian, like, HR is not responsible for any of these things. Everybody's responsible for these things, for culture, for development, for growth, for success of the business. And yet, a lot of times the heavy lifting falls on us, and that's fine, but we've got to make sure that we are bringing people along with us. And the more that we can communicate and over communicate, I think the better people understand. You just can't assume that because something seems easy to understand that everybody's going to understand it. Our lowest paid employees probably don't understand the importance of our retention at our company, right? Like, the cost to bring in a new person is so significantly higher with our cost of vacancy than retaining people. But people don't understand that at the lower levels. They just think, oh, my colleague left, like, no big deal. You need to help people on that journey of understanding. And it's a constant journey. It's not points in time.
And if
Very
I
good
may
point.
add on to that, I think the role that we are playing is that facilitation. And Lisa just said, there are some parts of the organization that are close to the action, that are holding on to gold dust in terms of what's going on in the market, and to facilitate that knowledge and that voice upwards through the organization to make those big strategic decisions is really critical. And I think we have that really big role to play from a creative and innovative, but also what's actually going on in the market, from the boardroom to the, like, what's at the grassroots level. And if we can facilitate that, I think it's very powerful.
Very good point. It reminds me also of a point that this is, again, I was a little bit older than the other example, but and I had moved up to a role of executive compensation manager at a listed firm. It was called TNT before the Post Group and TNT Express split as companies, before the failed takeover attempts by FedEx and UPS. The CEO organized basically a retreat, 250 of the top managers each year. And even though I was fairly junior, but because I was an exec comp manager, I was allowed to be there because, you know, things were discussed. And very often people would come to HR and go, like, complain about, you know, $1 million is not enough, can be $1.5 million. One of the things that annoyed me about exec comp is always about up and with big amounts. It isn't up like 1%, no, it's up 15%. But I was there, HR was there, finance was there, and HR was complaining, the HR director at the time was complaining that she didn't get enough money for a leadership development course. And yeah, with the top 250 in a resort for that week, we should talk about it. And the CEO said, well, I want to give you money, but I'll give you an example of why I struggle. I'll give you this example. And he said, can you by 12 today, by noon, answer me a question. And he asked the CFO question and he asked the CHRO question. The CFO question was, can you tell me by noon today what our cash flow position around the world is, net cash flow position at midday? And with CHRO, he said, can you tell me of the 250 people who are here this week, how many people are celebrating their birthday this week? Come back by noon, give me the answer. The CFO came back and said, cash flow position is X around the world, and it was accurate to the euro. CHRO, I think, is still looking for the answer. And what he was trying to say with that, in a very cheeky way, he was a bit cheeky. He was Dutch, so a bit direct, bit cheeky. It's kind of like all well-intentioned, but not always appreciated everywhere. But what he was trying to say is like, look, if you can promise me that your data is accurate, that your processes are accurate and to the point, and that I can trust the input and output of what you're doing, I'll give you money. But right now, my biggest issue with HR isn't that you're not creative enough, that you're not understanding or communicative enough. My problem with HR is that you're not accurate enough. I just can't rely on your processes and data. What's your response to that? Have you seen any of that in your organizations? We're all on mute and we're all laughing. Who would like to share their pain, the war story?
Well, I think this goes back to our profession growing, investment and being taken seriously. So I do think there was a time in our careers, and I think there probably still is, where you've had not much investment in systems from a people perspective. You've then had lots of mergers and acquisitions, and then it gets complicated. Now, I'm sounding a little bit like, here's a bit of an excuse. I think now that investment's coming. I think startups will put that investment in. For us as a profession, and I think I said this earlier, it's about the data accuracy, and importantly, it's about the insights and what are you going to do about that and how does that impact the business. So you're back into the communication piece from an impact perspective, but you need the starting point of the data. And I think now we're starting to think about, okay, what skills do we need that will be different in our profession, which is really around data analysts, data science people who can really look at that data quite in a factual way and say, look, this is what I'm finding, and let's have the conversation around it. So I do think we're in a real critical point now. If we don't have that, we can't be successful, and we're on a journey of where it can be successful. I think it's a great story, and I think we should all be mindful of it.
Well, Kirstin, I would add on, you mentioned something about like the skill set of this profession, right? Like, I actually have a dear friend who is a CHRO for another organization. And again, I'm not suggesting that people can't grow up in HR and be very successful CHROs, but CEOs are looking for a very different model of what a CHRO is. Like, they're looking at people who have actually been a functional business leader, who have very strong levels of business acumen, understand how a business strategy is actually developed and executed. And unfortunately, in a few scenarios I've seen, the CHROs that have grown up in more of the just HR role, CEOs don't take as seriously. Even if they have all the data at their fingertips, there is a perception about their actual understanding of the business experience. And something as silly as the birthdays, I get that, but CEOs are looking for a very different model. So are CFOs. I spend more time with our CFO here at EverCommerce than I actually do with our CEO, who is my direct leader, because we're constantly talking about the financial implications of our workforce planning strategies and how we're building out new models to optimize our expenditure and our exposure. And I'm an active part of that conversation. My dear friend who is a CHRO isn't even invited to those conversations at her organization because her CEO doesn't believe she has the skill set and background to be an effective contributor to the discussion. So I think some of that is a testament to the evolution of what our roles are becoming. And I will say more and more CEOs that I talk to are looking for people who have spent significant portions of their career in sales, in operations, in finance, and other areas where they're coming in as a well-rounded executive versus somebody who's only grown up in HR. And again, it's not fair. I don't think it's right. I know very successful CHROs who have been in HR their entire career, but there is an evolving expectation. And again, we've got to invest then in our own growth and development to step outside of our function if that's the requirement, to go learn those other things.
Excellent point. I think we're nearing the end, so I want to just make sure now with the attendees, you can't really unmute yourself, but what you can do is put a chat in the chat, put a question if you have one. So please don't let that opportunity pass while you still can. Meanwhile, I will keep an eye on the chat. Meanwhile, and it's kind of like an open question here. How does technology change all of this for HR? Where does technology come in our role as trailblazers for the future of HR?
Technology, in my view, is only as smart as the person using it. I had a mentor who told me this many, many years ago, who said this about Excel. And, you know, much to what Lisa and Kirstin said, I think it's important that now it's great that we have all these new tools, but if you as an HR professional aren't looking to and asking the question, what are the parameters that we should be tracking? If you don't know the answer to that, just start. I mean, you have the amount of information and data that we have at our fingertips is insane. If you're not making sure that they're all in one place, first of all, if you're, you know, you still have things in PDF and in Excel and all of this stuff, and you're not prioritizing the data that you have, and then you're not, I mean, forget about then looking to them for stories that they're telling you about your organization. So the technology is wonderful as long as you are actively using it. It's just like that treadmill that we all have in our house. It just sits there and gathers dust. If you use it, it's going to work for you.
Yep. I feel caught. Thank you. Anoop, I want to go to you next. What is your feeling about technology?
Look, I think, you know, to Aysha's point, technology, I think, has become omnipresent. And if we look at the last, again, you know, the last 18 months has done so many different things for us. And I keep talking about the silver linings. One of the things that has made us realize is that we can't do without it. And at the same time, one of the things I will mention, which is really critical, is there's a lot of things that take our attention from many things, but the core of this, going back to the central theme that we opened up the conversation with, is the people. And let's not forget that doesn't matter what it is that we do and how tech plays a role and plays a part, the human being and the people that come to work every day, that's front and center. And how might we really bring all that to really serve everyone? That to me is the biggest purpose of this.
I see no questions, so I would like to round it off with Kirstin and Lisa adding their perspective.
Well, listen, I've grown up a large part of my career in HCM technology, working for Ultimate Software and Ceridian. So I have found technology to be a huge enabler, right? I agree with the comments about technology is only as smart as the people using it. But a lot of people look at technology as a disruptor. And I mean, if you look at where we've been over the last 18 months, technology has been a significant enabler in keeping our people connected, in keeping our cultures as aligned as we possibly could, and in providing, you know, mental support and health support to our people through telehealth. I mean, technology is absolutely crucial to our future, but we need to look at it in ways to enable our people experiences or, you know, other experiences, and not look at it as a disruption. And we need to take the time to really invest in technology that makes sense for us, right? Like, I've seen lots of companies in my day go out and buy a piece of technology because that's what everybody else is buying, and then they implement it, and they implement the exact same way they were using the previous technology and expect different outcomes, right? Like, you know, what, garbage in, garbage out. Like, technology in and of itself is not the end all. You've got to evolve your experiences, your processes, your workflows, and things of that nature with the technology in order to drive a better outcome. The technology in and of itself is not going to solve any problems.
I don't really know what else to add, because I totally agree with everything everyone has said. But I do think there's something here about we go online, and everything we do now, even more so, And what is that experience online, which is really important for your organization's brand, internally and externally. And it's an absolute enabler for us as people professionals to spend our time in the best place. It's going to make the biggest impact to the business. So it's building all those things together.
Well said. Well said. I think our attendees have to go back to the main session again. So I just want to a huge thank you to all of you in very, very diverse time zones, making it to this panel, preparing for it, and sharing your thoughts. I found it hugely insightful, and I hope, and I'm sure the attendees had the same feeling. So thank you so much, and good morning. Good rest of the morning, good night, good afternoon, and I hope to see you soon again. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.